This is, of course, a most humbling moment for me. The story that'll be told inside the walls that are yet to be built here is the story not only of a presidency, but of a movement, a determined movement dedicated to the greatness of America and faith in its bedrock traditions, in the essential goodness of its people, in the essential soundness of its institutions, and yes, faith in our very essence as a nation.
Welcome to the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library, where the legacy of the 40th President of the United States is brought to life. I'm Gary Sinise, and I'm honored to take you through the journey of an American hero. Before we walk through the Reagan Library, I want you to know that this tour is brought to you by the Reagan Foundation. You see, the Reagan Foundation receives no government funding. President Reagan would have wanted it that way. His foundation counts on donations from people like you to support the library. It's your support that makes sure his legacy and ideals continue to live today. After this tour, you'll have a chance to click on the Get Involved section to learn more. So let's get started. The design of this incredible facility is California mission-style architecture and is located on about 100 acres overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Simi Valley, California. No surprise, this humble man, Reagan, didn't want his library to focus on one man or one political party or even one country. Instead, he said the focus should be on the enduring fundamental principles of life that ennoble mankind. Unfortunately, we can't visit every interesting corner of this great presidential library on this brief tour, but we'll hit the highlights. The entire work product of President Reagan's White House, his papers, speeches, photographs, audio and video footage, gifts to President and Mrs. Reagan, all of it is stored and preserved here, and much of it displayed provide the intellectual core, so to speak, of a presidential library. What's so great about the life of Ronald Reagan is the story of how an ordinary guy grew up to do extraordinary things. In a nation where any boy or girl can grow up to be president, Reagan lived that promise and changed our world forever. But for now, let's focus on a moment when he gave a speech on behalf of Barry Goldwater in 1964 that changed his life and, fortunately, changed ours.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
This speech vaulted him to become California's governor and ultimately President of the United States. He sat right here at this desk. And here at the Reagan Library, you'll see a leader in action, a man of strong conviction and principles who succeeds through tenacity and an extraordinary ability to communicate. In 1980, America was plagued with problems: gas lines, soaring interest rates, double-digit inflation, communism on the rise, and Americans held hostage in Iran. But the biggest problem, Reagan believed, was that we had lost faith in ourselves. He was elected America's 40th president, and here at the Reagan Library is an exact replica of his office as it was when he reminded all of us that the best was yet to come. Seated at this desk, he delivered almost 30 addresses to the nation. He reassured us when he said our dreams, our hopes, our goals would be the goals of his administration. He always believed in telling the story straight to the people, so from this desk, he told us about his economic recovery plan, about tragedies in Beirut, about trials in the Middle East, about his belief in peace through strength, about triumphs in U.S.-Soviet negotiations, and from this desk, he bid Americans farewell in January 1989. Remember morning in America? It started right here, getting government out of the way and giving the economy back to the people.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better.
President Reagan's dream of bringing his Air Force One to the people became a reality. This aircraft, SAM Special Air Mission 27000, made its last presidential flight on August 30th, 2001, and is on display for everyone to see and tour. Here you'll learn how this plane transported President Reagan to scores of countries in his quest to end the Cold War and bring about a better future for generations who followed. Of the flights made by 7 presidents aboard this aircraft, few were more historic than the journeys flown by Ronald Reagan. The plane transported President Reagan to Reykjavik, Moscow, Berlin, and beyond, enabling him to spread his message of hope and freedom throughout the world. Imagine the historic discussions that took place aboard this aircraft. The plane that flew President Nixon home following his resignation. The plane that flew President Ford to meet Brezhnev. The plane that flew President Carter to Germany to meet our 52 American hostages on their way home from Iran. And the plane that flew Ronald Reagan to Berlin, where he had the courage to ask Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall. Before we make our way to the Berlin Wall, I just want to tell you a few other things you'll find here at the library. You might know that President Reagan once said, "There is nothing as good for the inside of a man as the outside of a horse." Well, the exhibit about Rancho del Cielo, the ranch in the sky, describes his feelings about his beloved ranch. Reagan once said, "You look at the beauty of it, and God really did shed his grace on America." And there's a gallery about his sidekick, as he called her, Mrs. Reagan. She once said that her life really began when she met her husband. You probably remember when he said,
What do you say about someone who gives your life meaning? What do you say about someone who's always there with support and understanding? Someone who makes sacrifices so that your life will be easier and more successful.
Step outside the library and you'll see a piece of the Berlin Wall. Ronald Reagan received this 6-ton piece of the wall for the library in 1990 on behalf of the 131 victims who lost their lives at the wall, and the millions of brave citizens who brought the wall down. Looking at this symbol of oppression and communism, it now stands here in the open air in freedom, up at Reagan's shining city in stark contrast to its original purpose. President Reagan said it destroyed families, shattered dreams, and crushed hopes. And when it came down, he wasn't surprised, because as he said, man's yearning for freedom can be satisfied in only one way: freedom. This wall is the real deal. Colorful on the west side, stark and severe on the east.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Bring your children and grandchildren to the Reagan Library to see this piece of the Berlin Wall and reflect on its historical meaning. When President Reagan died on June 5, 2004, he was laid to rest here at his library. Above the gravesite is a quote from the president. "I know in my heart that man is good, that what is right will always eventually triumph, that there is purpose and worth to each and every life." Thanks for joining me on this tour honoring one of our nation's greatest presidents. I invite you to visit the library to embrace the freedom legacy of Ronald Reagan and to celebrate his principles that we continue to honor today. To learn how you can participate, click Get Involved. Thank you.